Alrighty, welcome back to the channel. We are back with another Star Wars Unlimited deck tech, and today we are talking about Luke Skywalker, Faithful Friend. His action is you pay one resource and tap him to give a shield token to a heroic unit you played this phase. So that can be very good for making sure your units trade favorably. Obviously, shields are very strong in this game. On his flip side, he is a 4/7, and when he attacks, you can give another unit a shield token. So it loses the resource cost, and it loses the heroic restriction. A 4/7 deployed on 6 is pretty good. It gets better with some of the stuff we have in this deck. We are running Luke Green, so we have Energy Conversion Lab as our base. This enables some shenanigans with some of the units that we've chosen to play. Some of the space units, some of the space units are reliant on this. So we'll go through that now. We're going to start talking about. We'll start off with the equipment. Obviously, we are running 2 Luke's lightsaber. This is a 2 resource cost. Attach it to a non-vehicle unit. When you play it, if that non-vehicle unit is a Luke Skywalker, you heal all of his damage and give him a shield token. It adds +3 attack and +1 defense. We're running 2 of these because you don't want to draw a bunch of them, but the effect is almost mandatory in a Luke deck. It's so powerful if you attach it to a Luke and heal. If you can heal 6 damage from an almost dead Luke, and then give him the additional power, he can single-handedly end the game. So we're running 2 of those. That is the only equipment that we are running. The rest is space units, effects, and ground units. As for effects, we are running a singleton copy of It Binds All Things. This deck has enough force units that this turns into a removal spell against aggro, and it can create a very strong swing. It's very situational because you do need to have damage on a unit, but if you were to, let's say, Energy Conversion Lab in a Battlefield Marine and it hits a Crafty Smuggler to destroy its shield, you could then It Binds All Things, heal the 2 damage from the Crafty Smuggler on your Battlefield Marine, and flip it to to kill the Crafty Smuggler. That's assuming you have a force unit. Luke in your leader zone does not count as a force unit. He is a force card, but it is not a force unit unless it's played. So it does have some hoops to get around, but it can create very strong swings. So we're doing one of that. We have the full play set of Takedown, because this card is just bananas against aggro. You hold it up on the Sabine turn, on Sabine's deploy turn, you pass the turn and you just destroy Sabine with it. Almost mandatory in any blue deck because Sabine exists in the format. We are running 2 Vanquish because other leaders, this doesn't care about leaders, but other units exist that have more than 5 toughness, so this will deal with a Fett's Fire Spray. This deals with a Reinforcement Walker. This deals with any large threat. We're running that as a duo with the 3rd in the sideboard for the matchups that it matters in. We are a ramp deck, so we're running 3 copies of Resupply. This card just speaks for itself. It is a resource. You play it as a resource. You pay 3. You essentially go to turn 4. From a resource perspective. We are a U-Wing reinforcement deck, so you will see some of the units in the deck reflect the fact that we are a U-Wing reinforcement deck. It turns us into kind of a more toolboxy deck, so there are some cards that are in this deck that wouldn't normally be in a deck of this type, just because of this card and the value that you can get out of them when you find them with this card. So a full play set of U-Wing reinforcement, and then we are running a single Traitorous because this card's silly. It forces your opponent to either deal with their own unit or deal with your upgrade. I like it as a one of in a green deck because you can steal a Boba Fett, you can steal any number of large creature and make your opponent have to deal with that. That's what we're running for events and non-unit spells. Magic player. We're going to move into the Space Arena here and talk about those units. We do start off with the Restored Arc 170. This is a 2/3 for 2 resources with Restore 1. We run that as a playset because it's nice to have something early to hit in the space realm to go with the Battlefield Marine on the other side. Just having something that is 2 cost to make sure you have something to play on turn 1 is very important in any deck. This deck, we are kind of aiming for the Restore, so Restore Arc 170 is the move here. We are running a full 3 Consortium Vipers. A lot of decks are sideboarding this for Sabine. This card is good enough to be a main deck card in a meta that Sabine is the best deck. If you have Initiative, this card has Restore 2, which is very strong against aggro, just in and of itself. It comes down on turn 2 naturally as a 3/3 that deals with every single space unit in Sabine on defense as a favorable trade. The A-Wing will trade with this, but only if it's attacking into it. So if you're able to play this, get the initiative, follow it up with a Bright Hope, then you'll be able to favorably trade into an A-Wing. That matchup alone is worth deck building considerations in my neck of the woods anyway. So Consortium Star Viper, this thing is also nasty off of an ECL. Sometimes you're going to hold open ECL just for Consortium Star Viper. Again, because it trades favorably with their A-Wings, with their X-Wings, X-Leaders, and even their red ones. So this card's very good in the meta right now. Speaking of Bright Hope, we are running a full play set of Bright Hope. Sentinel in space, just crazy. We haven't talked about it yet, but we are an Alliance Dispatcher deck. So if you can turn 1 an Alliance Dispatcher, turn 2 a Bright Hope off of an Alliance Dispatcher, that's pretty backbreaking on its own. It becomes a very difficult card to deal with if you're playing it ahead of the curve. Even an on-curve Bright Hope with a shield on it is also incredibly difficult to deal with. So that's what we're running for Bright Hopes there. And then we are running 2 copies of Home 1 to start off our late game. An 8-drop 7/7 that has Restore 2 and gives everything else Restore 2 would be good enough. It doesn't need any more text beyond that. This deck wants all of that stuff. However, Home 1 has more text. It says when you play, or you can play a heroic unit from your discard pile, it costs 3 less. Now, if we think about all the stuff we have in this deck that costs 3 less, we'll have all sorts of targets. We're a toolbox deck. If you're on 8 and you play this with an Alliance Dispatcher, you can get a 4-drop back because it costs 3 less. You can still play it for 4. You just have to pay 1 at that point. So Home 1, very strong card in this deck. We are running that as a 2 of, and then we have Redemption in as a single copy. This card is incredibly difficult to deal with ahead of the curve. And Alliance Dispatcher is a very good card in that it gets your big units out ahead of the curve. This is a 6/9 Sentinel, so even if you don't use its one-plate ability, it creates a situation where they have to deal with a 6/9 Sentinel in space. And a lot of decks aren't running the kind of space units to deal with this right now. It would be probably a 3-for-1, at least a 2-for-1, maybe a 3-for-1. To include Fet's Fire Spray, they would require 2 Fet's Fire Sprays to deal with this, and it would take them both out on its way out. So that's as favorable gets. We just really like Redemption. There's a couple copies in the sideboard as well against specific matchups, like the mid-range and control matchups that are running those bigger Space Arena units. But that's what we're running in space. And finally, we're going to move on to the Ground Arena. And as we've talked about already, we're running a full playset of Alliance Dispatcher. It's fairly unassuming in the early game, but if this guy is allowed to cook, it can be responsible for a lot of damage. Not doing any of its damage itself, obviously, it just cheats you out stuff a turn earlier, and playing ahead of the curve is what this deck wants to do. So full play set of Alliance Dispatchers, full play set of Battlefield Marine, because Battlefield Marine is simply the best 2-drop ground unit in the game right now. It's got push stats. It's a 3/3. We like him. We are running a duo of Colonel Yularen, because this goes back to the U-Wing reinforcements. This is really a toolbox card. If you were to hit a Colonel Yularen, a Battlefield Marine, and an Echo-based Defender on your U-Wing reinforcement, you would not only add 9 power and 9 toughness to the board, but you would gain 3 damage back from your base. Such a powerful card. You can also play him on turn 1 if you want to. If you do open your hand with him. He tends to get dealt with pretty quickly. He is only a 2/3. As a turn 1 play, it's not terrible, because it does still heal your base beyond that once you play the green units, the command units. So we're running 2 Colonel Yularans, and we are running a play set of Echo-based Defenders. These guys are just 4/3 Sentinel for 3. Again, just a good solid stat unit. It has Sentinel, makes you attack. It's not a great Sentinel because it only has the 3 hit points, but it is a Sentinel which can protect some of your other stuff, like your Colonel Yularans and your Alliance Dispatchers that do require protection from time to time. We are running a pair of Admiral Akbar. Again, I hesitate to call this a toolbox card, but it kind of is a toolbox card. If you hit it with U-Wing reinforcements, it can create a situation where you deal a fair bit of damage out of nowhere. However, it's also good on its own. It is just it's a 1/4 stat body, which isn't great. It does typically take 2 attacks to deal with, so you should be at least getting its Restore 1 out a time or 2. You may be able to attack with it a couple of times, but the real power of this card comes from its when played ability. You may deal damage to a unit equal to the number of units you control in its arena. So that means if you, same scenario, except instead of an Echo-based Defender, you hit Colonel Yularen, you hit a Battlefield Marine, and you hit an Admiral Akbar for your 7 cost, you're now gaining 3 life for your base and dealing at least 3 damage, because Admiral Akbar checks all of the stuff in your ground arena. So you'd be able to deal 3 damage from just that interaction to something on your opponent's ground side. So that's pretty solid. We like Akbar. We're only running him as a 2 though, because he is kind of toolboxy. Another toolbox card is Canon Jarrus. I don't love this card. I think that it's very good off of Energy Conversion Lab, and it's very good when you're playing ahead of curve. So if you're playing it off an Alliance Dispatcher, you're getting a 4/5 body on turn 2. That can be very difficult for your opponents to deal with, and then when he attacks, you do start to attack their deck a little bit. So we don't have any other Spectre units in the deck. We're not running Ghost. We're not running any of the other Spectre units. So you're only ever going to mill 1 card from them, but that can still impact their game a little bit. It also cares about the aspects. So Sabine, this is a very good card against Sabine, because that deck runs a lot of dual aspect. It's going to be running a lot of the heroic and red, or heroic and green. It cares a lot about that. It cares about that in Leia. Almost all of the cards in Leia Red are duo aspect. So you're going to heal, you're going to attack their base, you're going to mill 1 of their cards, you're going to deal 4 damage to their base, you're potentially going to heal 2 damage to your base. It does a lot. So while it's not the greatest card on its own, circumstantially it's very good, and this deck provides the correct circumstances for this card to be very good. So we're running it as a 3 of. And then we move into a 6-drop. We don't have any 5-drops in this deck. Because we're playing ahead of the curve, Obi-Wan becomes his 5-drop, kind of. And then with Obi-Wan, we're looking for his Sentinel, and then as when defeated, there's just a ton of value in this card. On turn 5, a 4/6 isn't the craziest card, but it is pretty good. So having Sentinel on it, and then when defeated, you get 2 experience tokens to another friendly unit. If it's a Force unit, you get to draw a card. It leads very well into Luke. So Obi-Wan kind of protects Luke. So you play... The interaction is actually with the leader, Luke. So he comes down on 6, right? So in essence, you're looking to play Obi-Wan on your 6 resource turn to have Sentinel up, so that when you flip Luke, when you epic action Luke, they have to attack Obi-Wan still. He keeps Luke safe. It's very on brand for Obi-Wan, right? And then when Obi-Wan dies, you get to give 2 experience to another friendly unit. Well, you give it to Luke, he is suddenly a 6/9, and then you get to draw a card. So it's late game. It's very late game sequencing, but it's very strong. And you can also give it to Cannon, because he's also a Force unit. Canon Jarrus is also a Force unit, so you would make him strong too. So like you have value options with Obi-Wan, but he's a 6-drop that has a lot of value on him. Luke, there's not really much to be said about Luke. This card is pushed. A 7-drop 6/7 with Restore 3 that comes in and should be destroying something. With either -3/-3 or -6/-6 for the phase. You're going to be taking something out, probably either way. Just a very, very good card, and if you're running Heroic Blue and you're not running Luke, I don't know why you're running Heroic Blue. So, we run him as a full playset, obviously, and our final card is a Reinforcement Walker. This card, I have 1 in the main deck, and I have 2 in the sideboard. I just didn't want to overload the deck with so many high-cost things. But because this has a when played and an on attack that allows you to heal your base, it needs to be included in a meta that is full of aggro. If you can get to 8 and Luke Reinforcement Walker doesn't win you the game, you weren't supposed to win that game. Speaking of the sideboard, that's all we have to take a look at now. So we're gonna do that. We have 1 copy of Traitors in the sideboard, because sometimes taking your opponent's things is fun, so we want to do it twice. We have the additional 2 copies of It Binds All Things. This is going to be very good again against aggro matchups. We just didn't have room for it in the main board. Otherwise, it would be in there. I think Vanquish in the main board. You need to have Vanquish in the main board. You need to have Takedown in the main board. It Binds All Things is very good when you're supposed to be the control deck, and that's where Vanquish comes into play and Make an Opening. So we're running the final copy of Vanquish and the full play set of Make an Opening in the sideboard. Sometimes this deck is the control deck, and you just need to sideboard out your aggro elements and just become the control deck. The other 2 copies of Reinforcement Walker and the second copy of Redemption. Just for the same reasons that I mentioned that they're in the deck, that's why they're in the sideboard, because there are certain matchups where those cards are very good. I've got a couple of gameplays from Force Table queued up here. I have 1 against Sabine Green, and I have 1 against Boba Green, which are the 2 strongest decks in the meta right now. So stick around for that. If you like what you saw here, go ahead and smash that like button. If you want to find your way back for more Star Wars Unlimited content, go ahead and hit that sub button. As always, thank you for watching, and have a great day. Hey y'all, I just wanted to touch base from the editing room here. I made a fairly major change to this deck by adding the Forces With Me. This card, I removed a Traitorous, and It Binds All Things, and a Consortium Star Viper for this card, and it was one of the best performing cards in the entire deck at the event that I just got home from. The event didn't go well for me. It was a lot of misplays on my side. The deck is strong. It has a lot of good matchups, and the Forces With Me was pretty easily one of the best cards in the deck. Give the deck a shot. It's a fun one. Enjoy the gameplay.
from the sheath of Skywalker.